That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, let's go through. Let's dive into some rookies that have gained value this offseason in the Dynasty fantasy football community. And I will admit, there's a player here that I was wrong on. We called him overvalued at the beginning of the offseason. Then he gained value. And now I'm having to say, okay, I understand it. We were wrong. I'll get to exactly why. But of course, before we do so, please go down there. Drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, thank you for being a part of the flock. Let's dive into it. And let's just go with the easy player. Let's start it off with Breece Hall. I'm going to be very, very brief with Breece Hall because y'all know I have talked about him, I swear to God, every opportunity I've had this offseason once we had the NFL Combine and how exciting he is because this is a running back that checks every box. He's a BMI over 30. His team college target share is almost at 12%, and he's a great pass-catching running back. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. He declared early for the NFL draft. He'll be a borderline round 1, round 2 NFL draft pick. I mean, if we're just going through and looking at all these boxes, Breece Hall is one of the best running back prospects that we have seen in a very long time. Now, what I can actually do for y'all is let me go over and let me pull up our Dynasty rookie draft guide. And now I know this is not technically out yet. You can go and pre-order it on flockfantasy.com if you would like. And thank you so much for everybody who's already pre-ordered it. I will definitely get that out to you at the latest May 4th, May 5th. The absolute latest. A ton of it's already been written. The thing is, I just have to wait until we get the landing spots. I have to wait until we get the actual NFL draft capital. But if I pull up our model's score on Breece Hall and look at some of the historical comparisons that we have, now this is going to be a little tough to just nail down the exact score right now because we don't know what the exact draft capital looks like. But if we say Breece Hall gets drafted in round 1, if he gets drafted before pick 32, he'll score a 26 in our running back model. And the only running backs to have ever scored a 26 or higher, Barkley with 30, Leonard Fournette, 28, Todd Gurley, 26, JT, Jonathan Taylor, 26, Zeke, 26, Joe Mixon, 26, and Christian McCaffrey, 26. That is an elite group to be a part of. And because of so, you've seen his value rise. I will say if he falls to the beginning of the second, then a couple other comparisons, he'll score 25. You got guys like Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, and Rashad Penny also jumping into this mix. But that's besides the point. We'll wait to get that out for that Dynasty draft guide. Excited about it. But if we go over and look at where he's currently being valued in Dynasty startup drafts, at the time of the NFL Combine, right before, according to DLF ADP, he was the running back 19. And y'all know the day that combine happened, I came out and I said, you know what? Let's be bold. Let's adjust Breece Hall with our prospect evaluation. Let's give him a new ranking. He's no longer the running back 19 according to DLF ADP. We ranked him as the top 5 running back in Dynasty. We put out that video the very next day. People called us crazy. But what is hilarious is if we go over to keep trade cut, and you look at where Breece Hall is currently being valued in Dynasty today, Breece Hall is being valued as the running back 5 in Dynasty. He has risen to hold that truly elite bell cow running back value. And I mean, if we go over and check him out on Underdog Fantasy, of course, where high stakes redraft leagues are happening, where people are playing with real money on the line, go sign up for drafts on Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK. When you use promo code FLOCK, you'll be able to have a ton of fun getting into real money fantasy drafts. On top of that, you'll get our Dynasty research book, our Dynasty rankings, our Dynasty rookie rankings. Please take advantage. Promo code FLOCK. Also, 100% deposit bonus. But here, Breece Hall is going as the running back 16. I mean, in a redraft perspective, Breece Hall is going in the same round as Saquon Barkley, Antonio Gibson, and Leonard Fournette. That is to give you an idea of where he's being valued. I mean, if you go over and if you look at grinding the mocks, you can kind of see that he was supposed to be a borderline round 1 pick last offseason. Then for whatever reason, despite him having a great year at Iowa State, mock drafters dipped him down. If y'all remember, at some point at the beginning of the offseason, NFL mock drafters had Isaiah Spiller going ahead of him. Then after the combine, now clearly Breece Hall is the running back 1 again, right back to where he was. So this is just a perfect example of a player that gained value this offseason. I don't think we should sell high, because I think if we look at how predictive our running back model is, and on top of that, how important these metrics are for the running back position in particular. You know, we were talking about wide receiver. These athletic testing numbers not really mattering. Running back, they do. We care about size, care about passing game ability, we care about speed, we care about opportunity, which equals NFL draft capital. I'm very excited about Breece Hall, and I think he is appropriately valued. There's not much to say, but let's go over to our next guy. This is someone that I have to take let's hold him off. We'll get into him in depth. Let's go over to someone that wasn't really on the radar at all in offseason to go. Let's get to Christian Watson. Now, with this Christian Watson profile, he goes to the combine. He tears it up. Obviously, this is a big-bodied wide receiver. Not only is he massive, but he runs a 4.36, which is almost what people were hoping that you were going to get from Treylon Burks. Obviously, it didn't end up happening. I don't really care about his 40-yard dash time. I will say it's 100% going to get him drafted higher in the NFL draft. But as we've already said, there is a separation between wide receiver value from a real life NFL standpoint and from a fantasy standpoint when it comes to that speed. Teams should and will value wide receiver speed more than the fantasy football community should, because we know that a speedy wide receiver that forces both safeties to stay back, they will increase the efficiency of the offense without necessarily having to go out there and command a ton of volume. So that's why if you pull up Grinding the Mocks right now, you will see it's literally, it's like a chart of Tesla's stock price. I mean, just straight up to where now Christian Watson is being projected to be a late round 1 pick or early round 2 selection at the same time. Now, from a dynasty fantasy football standpoint, you have seen his value rise as well. You're seeing Christian Watson now being valued as the wide receiver 52 in Dynasty. That's 21 spots higher than where he started the offseason. And it's hard for me to argue against this. Now, I want to bring up Christian Watson because I know we've had a lot of people telling me, oh, Mason, you need to stop caring about players declaring early. You have to remember there was COVID last year that stopped a lot of players from declaring. I honestly think when people are using that argument, it's BS. If you were trying to tell me that James Cook, Zamir White, these running backs that declared late, they stayed the extra year because of COVID when they played an entire season, when the SEC was fully good to go. Why? Like, they were, that makes no sense whatsoever. They played the entire year. They still had just as many draft picks in the NFL draft last season. You're just using it as an excuse. However, Christian Watson is the one example where I think if you want to blame something on COVID, if you want to blame a player declaring late, Christian Watson, I am willing to write it off for him, because that's the one red flag that we are seeing on his profile. He declares late out of North Dakota State, but we have to remember, this is a team that didn't play last year. Trey Lance didn't really have an opportunity. So with Christian Watson, if he didn't have a full season last year and he's coming from a smaller school, it makes sense for him in particular to have to stay the extra year, even if maybe he wouldn't have had to in a different universe. So I'm fine writing it off for Christian Watson. And if we look at this, he had over 44% of his team's receiving production on a per game basis. He broke out as a sophomore. If he didn't break out till his senior season, this would be a different story, but he broke out before he sat out that year. The 40-yard dash is propelling him in the NFL draft. Maybe it's getting him on the board a little bit more for Dynasty because he's going to get the draft capital. I am unwilling to say that he's the player that now we need to be viewing ahead of someone like George Pickens, or we need to be viewing him ahead of Jahan Dotson. From a Dynasty perspective, I could see him being more valuable for an NFL team. But still, I think this rise for Christian Watson, it's warranted. And I just want to use this as an example of a player that I'm willing to write off the fact that he stayed an extra year in college because of COVID. I'm not willing to do it with the other options that got to play an entire year in 2020. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the player that I got wrong. Let's go ahead and talk about Skye Moore. Here with Skye Moore, this is an option that at the beginning of the offseason, I came out and said, you know what? I don't see it with Skye Moore. I mean, this is a player that is consistently being valued ahead of guys that I like, that I think are interesting later on in Wan'Dale Robinson, Justin Ross, and John Mechie. And I didn't really understand why Skye Moore was being valued there. And the big reason, the big negative I went to with the Skye Moore profile is going back to 2020, where Dwayne Eskridge just dominated him. And Dwayne Eskridge went in the second round to the Seattle Seahawks. At the time, Seattle still had Russell Wilson. So I was saying, instead of drafting Skye Moore in the second round of your rookie draft, please just take that pick. I mean, take a third round pick instead. Go get Dwayne Eskridge, when Dwayne Eskridge in that same offense, I mean, pretty much accounted for double the receiving production that Skye Moore had. Dwayne Eskridge had 40% of the team's receiving yards on a per game basis. And if you're not a believer in Dwayne Eskridge, you can't be a believer in Skye Moore. This is what I said at the beginning of the offseason. I have to be transparent because I want to not just stick with takes that I had in the past that clearly are wrong, because there were multiple things that we did not take into account with that 2020 season and with Skye Moore's profile overall. Because with Skye Moore, he still had a very large role in this team. With Skye Moore, he still was the second wide receiver on a per game basis. And really, there was nobody else in this offense. But what's embarrassing, and people called us out on this because I think my Dwayne Eskridge take was very bad, is we ignored how small the sample size was. And we ignored the context for the production of Dwayne Eskridge versus the context of the production with Skye Moore. Because Skye Moore in that 2020 season, he was a true sophomore. He was 19 years old, where Dwayne Eskridge was a fifth-year senior. Now, of course, you can say, okay, well, Mason, Dwayne Eskridge played some defensive back at Western Michigan. Are we really needing to bring this up? Yes, it's something that needs to be brought up, and I think that we just almost have to take our L here with Dwayne Eskridge versus Skye Moore, the comparison, because if we look at Skye Moore as a wide receiver in our prospect model, he does check every box. He broke out as a freshman, which we know 100% has correlation for success at the wide receiver position. Not only did he break out as a freshman, but he declares early for the NFL draft on top of this. And he's coming from a smaller school. Okay, so if you wanted to blame someone staying for COVID, you could have blamed it on Skye Moore. But he's declaring early. Also, he counted for over 40% of his team's passing yards on a per game basis his final season there once Dwayne Eskridge left. So he showed the dominance that final season as well. And let me get back to saying that in 2020, when I think we were overplaying Skye Moore versus Dwayne Eskridge, Skye Moore played 5 games. So while we were looking at the per game numbers, it was too small of a sample size to have a strong stance against Skye Moore. We were, I don't want to say ignorant when we did it, but I wasn't paying enough attention to the small details of the situation. So now if we look at Skye Moore checking every single one of these boxes, he goes to the NFL Combine. He runs a 4.41. I don't really care at the wide receiver position. At the wide receiver position, as long as you're not running a 4.24 where we need to make an adjustment to your NFL draft capital, as long as you're not going out there and running a 4.7, I don't really care about your 40-yard dash time as a wide receiver, but he is right in line with what we're expecting. And we put him into our wide receiver model, and he looks like he's a borderline top 5 guy. I'm not going to have him above the Jahan Dotson, above the George Pickens, but he's getting there. And you can see this with his keep trade cut value, because this is someone that is now the wide receiver 51, according to keep trade cut. This is someone that's always been drafted on Underdog. I mean, it's surprising to see that the drafters on Underdog at the very beginning of the offseason, they were drafting Skye Moore as one of really the few rookie wide receivers. Like right now, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 59 on Underdog, only 2 picks behind George Pickens. So his dynasty value and his redraft value, as I've said, I really think this Underdog ADP is valuable because that's where the real money leagues are with people over 18 years old. I mean, he's almost valued equally in dynasty and redraft. And as a rookie, that should tell us that he is a dynasty value at the moment. That should tell us something. On top of this, if we go and look at his projected NFL draft capital, this is a player that now is projected to go in the middle of round 2. I would not be surprised if, based on his speed with that production, that he slides up to the beginning of round 2, because I do think he is a better prospect than Dwayne Eskridge. I think we got this wrong at the beginning of the offseason based on us overlooking the fact that it was a very small sample and overlooking the fact that Dwayne Eskridge was 3 years older when he was dominating Skye Moore on that same offense. So I apologize for everybody I led back in the wrong direction, saying that nothing stood out from Skye Moore that didn't have Justin Ross, John Mechie, Wan'Dale Robinson all in line with him. I was wrong. I want to be on the record saying that. I want to fix that right now. If you go over to our rookie rankings on locals, you'll see that I have Skye Moore currently as the 16th player in Superflex and the 11th rookie in a one quarterback league, right behind Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, and Isaiah Spiller. I think he checks every box. I think we need to go through, move him up those rankings, and apologize for getting it wrong in the first place. But one player that I don't think we got wrong, and he's had a lot of hype, I truly don't understand why, is going to be Damien Pierce. Now, with Damien Pierce, you go over to Keep Trade Cut, you see that he is 24 spots higher in the running back rankings. You see that he has also risen in those startup rankings as well. Now, if we look at where he is being projected to go in the NFL draft, I mean, the chart looks like he has risen a lot, but he's not projected to be a second round pick by any means. This is someone that's most likely going to be going at the beginning of the fourth round. Most drafters still have him going on day 3. And if we pull up his prospect profile, if we can assume that with Damien Pierce, he is going to be a running back that goes on day 3 of the NFL draft, that goes outside the top 100 picks, which right now that's what Grinding the Mocks is telling us. And I think that we almost just take the wisdom of the crowds here. He's not going to have the NFL draft capital. So what we need to see for him to make a realistic difference based on our historical research on these running back prospects gaining value, we need to see him check almost every single box, and we need to see a couple of elite traits as well. Like, I'll be fine going out of our way and drafting someone like Rachaad White if he falls to the 4th round of the NFL draft, and all of a sudden we can say, okay, well, maybe if the Dynasty community reacts appropriately and Rachaad White falls to the end of the 2nd round of rookie drafts, I'll be fine taking Rachaad White because he does have some great traits. I mean, obviously one of the, if not the best pass catching running backs in this class. He has the speed as well. He'll have a couple red flags. He won't have the draft capital, and he also won't have the size. So we shouldn't be excited about it, but I can buy into it. With Damien Pierce, I'm not going to be able to do just that, because with Damien Pierce, this is a running back that stayed all 4 years in Florida. And Florida is another one of those schools that I'm not willing to write you the pass saying, oh, no, he stayed the extra year because of COVID. No, he's not Christian Watson. That's not this scenario. He goes to the combine. He runs a 4.59, so a borderline. Like, yes, technically you can get it done with that speed, but if you're going to be that speed, like I said, you can always be slow. You can always be undersized, but you can't be both at the running back position. You can either be a slow, big-bodied running back in Josh Jacobs. You can be a small, shifty running back in Naheem Hines, but you can't be slow and small, or your ceiling is Devin Singletary. Now, Damien Pierce, he's big. He has a BMI of over 31. So we can actually overlook the lack of speed with Damien Pierce, because if you're adjusting it for his size, he's fine in that regard. But what I would want to see is him to have the capability to catch passes at the next level. And I don't think that is the case. With Damien Pierce, he had a college target share of 4.8%. If you look at pretty much any running back that's come out of the NFL draft with a college target share less than 5% since 2014, none of them transition over to being pass catchers. It's not like you can't catch passes in college or your team doesn't use you that way. Then all of a sudden you get to the NFL and you are. I'd be fine with Damien Pierce in a non-PPR format, but in a PPR league, I don't understand this rise. I think there are a couple other players that I'd prefer. Like, let me pull up Keep Trade Cut and kind of figure out the range he's going ahead of. He's going ahead of those wide receivers I want to be taking shots on. He's going ahead of Justin Ross. He's going ahead of Wan'Dale Robinson. Those wide receivers that I think have very intriguing traits with their profiles. I don't see the ceiling with Damien Pierce if he's not going to be able to be a pass catcher. Let me run over to Underdog Fantasy, see if they are even drafting Damien Pierce. Maybe I'm missing something here. Yeah, Underdog Fantasy drafters literally are not even taking Damien Pierce. So for us to be taking him over guys like Justin Ross, Wan'Dale Robinson, I personally don't understand it. Like, if you like Damien Pierce, instead of drafting him ahead of Justin Ross or Wan'Dale Robinson in your rookie draft, hell, fire up some tournaments on Underdog. Just take him with your last round pick. If you take him in round 20, if you think he's going to do anything, because I just don't see it with this profile. I think this is a player that has risen for, I don't even know what the reason may have been. He's risen for no reason, in my opinion. I don't see anything that has changed. Please let me know if I'm missing something. Please go down there. Let me know if I'm an idiot as well. But to recap this video, probably selling high, Damian Pierce, taking my L with Skye Moore. Christian Watson, I understand the rise with Breece Hall. You know where we stand. But of course, thank you again. I really hope you appreciate the video as much as I appreciate you, and have a great day.